Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
Hi, Unpacked listeners. It's your host, Aislinn Green. If you listened to our September 12th episode, you know that Afar is celebrating its 15-year anniversary this year. I've been with the company for 10 of those years, and I love that Afar has always been rooted in the power of experiential travel. As we reflect on the past 15 years of Afar, we're celebrating our legacy and our commitment to making travel a force for good. So, for the next 4 months, we're dipping into the archives of our other podcast, Travel Tales, which celebrates the life-changing power of travel. Many of the episodes you'll hear started out as a story in the print magazine, like this episode from author Charmaine Craig. Charmaine has written 2 beautiful novels, and many years ago we sent her on a last-minute trip to Portugal in the wake of a fire that devastated her home and uprooted her family's life. It turned out to be just the trip that she needed. You'll soon hear that as she followed the trail of the country's most beloved author, Charmaine was able to make peace with loss and regain her hope.
"18 months ago, I returned home one afternoon to find that my house had been scorched all the way to the roofline, with the second-floor windows blown out and smoke billowing from the attic as firemen blasted it with water. What had happened was that about an hour previously, the house next door to mine, which was temporarily uninhabited, had burst into flames likely due to arson, and the fire had jumped to my property. I should mention that the houses, mine and the one next door, were actually twins, built in 1904 by the same woman, one for her and one for her marrying daughter. They weren't fancy, but they were Victorian craftsmen in style with high coped ceilings and lovely woodwork, the kind of craftsmanship and materials we just don't see in new structures. And as I stood there, taking in the damage, I had the fleeting thought that these structures had survived unscathed for over a century. And what was really being lost was history, and that loss had happened under my watch. And then there was the fact that my family had just come through a series of relocations, having moved twice in that year alone. That very morning, the morning of the fire, I'd finally felt settled enough to start my next novel in earnest. Normally I write at a desk, but for some reason that morning I felt called to lie with my computer on my bed, and I remembered taking a moment to observe the quality of the light filtering into the room and the way the trees were moving outside my window. I was filled with a sense of having arrived home, and I remember being palpably grateful. Well, 2 months and 2 relocations after the fire, I learned from Afar that I was being sent to Lisbon as part of their Spin the Globe series. That's the one where they don't tell you where you're headed until about 24 hours before you take off. Needless to say, I was still very much spinning from the fire, but as I hurtled away from my kids, I felt almost relieved to be leaving the disarray of our so-called home life, something that had become a near constant state of upheaval and nomadism, for a more discrete period of aimless wandering. A period when all I had to keep track of was myself. Out of what I rationalized was a sense of adventurousness, but what was probably a mixture of exhaustion and stoicism, I decided not to consult any kind of travel resource in preparation for the trip. I guess you could say I was throwing in my lot with impermanence. And after dumping my bags at the bed and breakfast a friend had recommended, I found myself pathetically following swells of tourists down cobblestone streets in one of Lisbon's historic districts. We squeezed through a series of stunning and strikingly similar squares before I found myself on a jammed commercial road where something caught my eye. A placard advertising the world's oldest operating bookshop, whose cafe was called the Sala Fernando Pessoa.
This episode is brought to you by FX's The Beauty Official Podcast. Join host Evan Ross Katz on the official podcast for FX's hottest new series, The Beauty, taking you behind the scenes with its amazing stars as they discuss the show's most jaw-dropping moments. Featuring Evan Peters, Anthony Ramos, Jeremy Pope, Ashton Kutcher, Rebecca Hall, Bella Hadid, Megan Trainor, Isabella Rossellini, Jessica Alexander, and Ari Grainer. Search FX's The Beauty wherever you listen to podcasts.
For most of my writing life, I've been consoled and inspired by the work of Pessoa, a Portuguese writer who called Lisbon his home and who died in the 1930s. You might not have heard of him, and it could be argued that he might not have wanted you to. Pessoa didn't actually write as himself for the most part, but through the vehicle of alter egos, what he called heteronyms. It's tempting to refer to them as pseudonyms, but they were so much more than that. They were entire beings whom Pessoa created and attributed most of his work to, and who readers of the day thought were real. These were beings with different histories, worldviews, styles. They wrote the poems, and some of them became the famous writers. A recurring idea in Pessoa's work is that he didn't exist. You could say he was the master poet of impermanence. And yet, there's tremendous feeling in his work. Feeling for Lisbon, for life, and especially for others. I had brought only one book with me on the trip, and it was Pessoa's Book of Disquiet. Something Pessoa didn't even try to get published, and that was discovered after his death among tens of thousands of pages of unpublished writing. Talk about embracing impermanence. And one of the narrators of this book is so sensitive to the people passing by on the street below that he can't help but imagine his way into their consciousnesses. He writes, "In my fourth floor flat, looking out over the infinite." There's a deeply spiritual, if melancholy, quality to the work that speaks to me. And seeing Pessoa's name on the placard by the oldest bookshop just an hour or so after my arrival felt like a sign, something personal that spoke to me directly over the din of tourism and consumerism. And something similar happened to me the next morning, when, squeezing through the crowded cloisters of the Geronimos monastery, I stumbled onto a modern pile of blocks that I soon realized was Pessoa's tomb. I hadn't known where he'd come to be buried, so it seemed uncanny that less than 20 hours in the city I'd run into this. If I hadn't predetermined my map of Lisbon, it seemed to be determining itself for me. That evening, I reached out by email to a local Pessoa scholar, an Italian and Lisbon transplant named Antonio Cardiello. He graciously offered to meet me the following afternoon near the empty square where Pessoa was born, in an apartment above what's now a Godiva shop. And soon we were chatting and making our way on foot through the city. And we landed on the same commercial street I'd found myself on after arriving, the one with the oldest operating bookshop. 30 years ago, he said, the street had been mostly derelict, abandoned. Then in 1988, a terrible fire took it out. Everything was destroyed. But that episode, he said, was merely an echo of a much more devastating one that had happened in the 18th century, when a violent earthquake, a subsequent tidal wave, and weeks of fire had razed the city, before the Marquis de Pombal had determined to completely recreate it. Something that explained both the grandeur and striking similarity of its squares. And passing through those squares with Cardiello now, I felt as though I were being hit over the head with the truism that history, of course, is anything but static. If with my own little house fire, history had in part been lost, I could play a part in the house's restoration and its evolution. On my last day in Lisbon, I visited a leafy neighborhood beyond the tourist districts where, amid quiet storefronts and apartment buildings, I found the address where Pessoa lived for the last 15 years of his life, in a building that's now a museum dedicated to his work and memory. The whole place has changed since his time, and Pessoa's bedroom is now just a recreation. But I still felt something as I stood looking over his bed. Or the recreation of that bed, I don't know. What mattered to me standing there was that he existed, in spite of his sense that he didn't. What mattered to me was that he slept alone on a narrow twin bed in an actual room, where he left a trunk filled with his tens of thousands of unpublished pages. Why did he leave so much unpublished? What if those pages had been burned, lost to history before ever having been found? What do you think he would say if he knew that half of them remain unpublished today? Would he say, impermanence was the point? Would he say, loss is essential to hope, and often the starting point of audacious feats of beauty?
Thanks for listening to our celebration of 15 years of Afar. We have so much more to share. To dive in, visit afar.com/15. The link is in the show notes. We'll also include links to Charmaine's books as well as her social media handles. We'll be back with our last retrospective episode on December 17th, a deep dive into the world of female flamenco musicians.